Okay, this is a video for Mark and John at Granger Morrell. You asked for a brief intro on how to do pivot tables, so I just thought I'd quickly record a beginner's lesson in 5 minutes or so, just to show you what can be done and give you the basics. So the key thing with pivot tables within a spreadsheet is to make sure that you've structured the data correctly. And the key rules are to keep the data in uniform columns, with each column being a different thing. No spaces in between the columns if you can. If you had to have a space in between a column, if I had one there, and you didn't have any data in it for whatever reason, then you'd have to title it with a word like blank or something like that. So make sure that every column has got something written in the top and it's different in every one, and then you'll put the data underneath each of these headings. So I'm going to populate this sample spreadsheet here where I've just put the bay machine, the date, the downtime code, downtime hours, and the reason. And I've prepared some data already just to make this a bit quicker, so I'm just going to copy this into here just to give me some data. But you can imagine that if you've been collecting some data, this might be what it's like. And apologies for the obvious noddiness of this data, it's just to try and get the basics done. And that date I can put into a date format by just changing that to a short date. There we go. So I've got some bay, machine, date, hours, and a region code piece of data, and I want to turn that into a pivot table. And to create the pivot table, you put the cursor anywhere within the data, click insert, and on the very left hand side it says pivot table. There you go. And you can just accept the defaults here. It's already chosen the data that you want, it's got the dotted line around the correct area, and it's going to put the answer into a new worksheet, which is correct. And there it is, it's a new worksheet down here. So the data is in sheet 1, and it's created a blank pivot table in sheet 2. Now this is what it always looks like. I'm going to zoom in a bit, just to fill more of the screen with it. And this is where the pivot table answer will be, but over on the right here, this is how you define what the pivot table looks like. So this little panel is divided into two halves of use, really. The top half, this lists the column headings that you had before, so these are the various bits of data that it has, and you'll in a minute tell it how you want to treat each of these pieces of data, if at all. The bottom half tells you how you want that data displayed in the table, and the main two areas you're going to use are the columns and the rows. The values are the bits where you're actually adding up the key thing you're after, and in our case there's only really one thing in here that has any data that we would want to add up or average or anything else, and that's the downtime hours. So I'm going to start with that, and I'll just click on downtime hours and drag it into the bit where it says values. And you can see straight away over here it's given me a grand total. So if all I wanted to do was to add it up, then that's one way of doing it, but obviously a fairly long-winded one. But now to break that down, I can decide how to break up that table into rows and columns by different things. So if, for example, I wanted to put the bay number in a row, and I drag that down there the same way, you can immediately see over here how it's treated that. So now each of the row numbers have got the bay numbers in, and it's split that data out according to how much of the downtime hours related to each of those bays. If I then wanted to do it by machine on, let's say, the columns, I'd get a two-dimensional table where I've got the bays down the left, the type of machine along the top, and then the various bits of data, core blower, model loop, or whatever, within here. Now we haven't used the date yet, so I could take one of these out. For example, let's take the bay out, put it in columns. Now I can put two, if I like, in one space. And if I do that, it just puts one under the other. So within bay 6 it has a core blower and a model loop. Within bay 7 it has a core blower and a model loop, and within bay 8 same. And it does totals, which you can turn off at a later stage. But we haven't told it to do anything with the rows yet, so that's just giving me a total. So now if I put the date in the row, click and drag and drop that to the rows, suddenly I've got a big table that's of some use. So I've got the thing along the top we just talked about, the machine and the bay, and now all the dates down the left. So you can see it's starting to spit out for me where all the bits of downtime have occurred, and I can see a total per day by going that way, a total per machine, or by bay if I look at those totals that way. And that's pretty much the easiest way of doing it. If I really wanted to fully explain this bit here, then I can drag another thing, let's say the reason, into the filters area. I haven't got anything, I think I put some letters in there, didn't I? And that would put a new box up above the table here, and it allows you to select which reason code you want to show it for. And as you can see at the moment we've selected all reason codes, and I can choose to be able to select more than one at a time. So I could, for example, just look at this data for A, B and C reasons, and there we go, it reduces the data accordingly. And that was all by putting the reason up in the top left. It might have been, for example, that I wanted the reason in the rows and the date as the filter. So now I've got reasons here which are still filtered, so I could have all of them. There they all are. And up here in the data I can choose which dates I want. So you see it's very flexible. You just choose how you want to use the various bits of the data by deciding what's the heading for the rows and dragging that one into here, what's the heading for the columns and dragging that in there, 1 or 2. The data itself is the key piece of thing that you're going to be adding up, and there's an optional use of the filters to just give you extra power to summarize everything. There you go, that's a beginner's guide to pivot tables in 5 minutes. Hope that's useful.